This week, President Trump's first joint address to Congress and the nation. Our panel reacts. Democrats struggle to find their footing in an opposition message to the Trump agenda. And one prominent member of the press admits what they knew about Biden's presidency all along. These stories and much more straight ahead this week on The Lion Week in Review. Welcome into this week's edition of The Lion Week in Review. It's a weekly look at the culture, the courts, your state capitol, and your kids. I'm Chris Stigall, and now let's meet our panel. Some of the men and women behind the stories at readline.com. All gentlemen this week. Josh Mann, our managing editor. Michael Ryan, executive editor. And Adam Wittenberg is deputy editor at The Lion. Well, fellas, this is a busy week. A lot of news, but let's just start with the joint address to Congress. And I got to tell you, it's still making news, even as we record this a couple of days later. Your first takes, Adam.
Yeah, I thought Trump did an amazing job. He was a great communicator, and my wife, who's not a big follower of politics and didn't even grow up in this country, was able to watch the whole hour and 40-minute address with me and enjoy it, not get bored, not wonder what is this all about. And I think that really actually bodes well for connecting with the average American who was watching it.
Michael, it was, I think, historic in length, almost 2 hours long. What do you think?
Yeah, and that was the quickest 2-hour speech I've ever watched. It was entertaining. It was dynamic, but mostly it was a self-immolation by the Democrats. I mean, I don't know who came up with the strategy of throwing a toddler tantrum the entire speech, but it was a disaster, and everyone you talk to who is fair-minded that saw that says so. And the walk-away movement from the Democrat Party is exploding now after that.
Josh, it was also a celebration of a lot of really remarkable Americans. One of the biggest discussion points after that was the 13-year-old who was deputized as a Secret Service agent by Donald Trump, hugged the Secret Service, head of Secret Service after it. That 13-year-old, he's gone positively viral.
That's right, and it was such a genuine moment. It's hard for anyone not to like that and love it, and even to see the face of the Secret Service agent whose face is pretty familiar because he's been around Trump a lot. I recognized him, for example, and he couldn't help but smile. Three of my favorite lines that I heard, my favorite was, "You are perfect exactly the way God made you," which was Trump's message to children who have been threatened by this toxic ideology called gender ideology. He also called this revolution that's taking place, this movement, a common sense revolution. I thought that was a great line. And then one of the last adjectives he used when he talked about wanting to make America great, more powerful, rich, he actually said the first adjective was freest. And I thought, that doesn't sound very dictatorial to me. That actually is a wonderful adjective, and, I'll hold him to it.
And in terms of its impact, what do you think it is, Adam? Is there any? I mean, it seems the polls suggest that most of the public that watched it anyway had no objection to it. In fact, supported most of it.
Yeah, I think it was a solid win for Trump. I did hear some critiques that maybe he didn't lay out massive new policies, or because that can kind of be done in these speeches, but he was connecting with real Americans, kind of proving that he has the victory. And like Michael was saying, I mean, the Democrats just did a horrible job. They wouldn't stand for the 13-year-old kid that overcame, brain cancer and now became a Secret Service agent. And one guy I saw online said the only time they applauded was for the mention of spending money in Ukraine. And they wouldn't applaud for anything in their own homeland. I mean, what do the Democrats really stand for?
It's interesting, since we last gathered, Michael, that blow up with Zelensky and Trump. It was last Friday in the White House. That came up a little bit. It appears that Ukraine is ready to come to the table and sign a deal after all. But whether it's domestically and the tariffs with Canada and Mexico, or now the spat back and forth with Ukraine, that dynamic has changed a lot.
Yeah, by the hour, it seems like. And, everybody who opposes what Trump is doing is really back on their heels at this point because he's moving at light speed. So many things are going on. For instance, the executive order to eliminate the Department of Education is on the table now, and this is just within weeks of his inauguration. It's just unbelievable.
Let's pivot to some of the stories you guys have written. By the way, I would just give a shout out to my colleagues here at The Lion. Big mention on a huge platform. Even Megyn Kelly, ladies and gentlemen, is now reading readlion.com. It should be noted, Josh Mann.
Yeah, that was really fun to see. Megyn Kelly referenced one of our stories about some things happening in California with sports and males playing against females. And actually, that was also shared on Twitter and got a reaction from Elon Musk, who said, "That's crazy." And so we always welcome new readers and audience members, and so we welcome Elon Musk and Megyn Kelly.
That's right. They're welcome to come on the show anytime. It will do nothing but help numbers. Let me talk about this pro-family panel, Josh, that you covered here most recently at readline.com.
Yeah, that's right. And my excellent colleague Chris Stigall actually hosted this or moderated this panel. It's a pro-family panel, and they were warning the audience of the ideological dangers to American children. And they were each asked what they see as the biggest threat. And they agreed that it's the radical ideology or the radical ideologies that children are facing, but also the cultural apathy that kind of allows these things to continue to just sit like stale pond water and just fester. And so really they're calling for action. And one thing these four activists have in common is that they are taking action, whether it's through writing news stories. Mary Margaret Olahan of the Daily Wire was one of the panelists. A Heritage Foundation research fellow, Delano Squires, speaks on topics of fatherhood and family really often. Katie Faust, who has her own organization, was part of the panel, and she had a lot of practical tips and really challenged church leaders to stand up and to start to talk about these issues. And then Billboard Chris was also part of the panel, and he's really a seemingly introverted Canadian who left his professional finance job to stand in busy places with these signs that are basically say common sense biological things on them, just to start conversations. And he would tell you, if I can do it, anybody can do it.
You know, Adam, Josh referenced that line from Donald Trump to children, to America's kids. You're perfect just the way God made you. How unique it is to hear a public figure, particularly on that size of a platform, say something like that to America's youth. And it drives home, I think, what Josh was just saying from that panel.
Yeah, well, I think one thing that we're seeing in today's world is as evil and some of these downright evil ideologies trying to turn boys into girls and girls into boys and things like that are getting fully public and embraced or, out there and doing dastardly things. I think we're seeing also the good getting more bold and more explicit about, no, we need to stand up against this. And so this is good. It's not good that the evil is rising up, but it's good that the righteous are rising up. And I think there's that famous quote, all it takes for evil to prosper is righteous men to do nothing, to say nothing. And I'm just going to read one quick quote from Josh's article that stood out to me. And it was one of the panelists about marriage and family. And he said, if you refuse to disciple your people on the issues of LGBTQ, marriage, sex, family, all these things, the leftist activists are happy to do it for you.
Yeah, Michael, we have talked about that before. Whoever wants the next generation the most will get them. Are we seeing a tide turn here? Again, with the president addressing children directly, saying they're made in the image of God and perfectly just the way they are. Is it just a matter of pushback? Because it is an 80-20 issue, it seems. You saw Riley Gaines and others standing up for women, not so much on the Democrat side, but it seems like this is a constant message, and I'd add school choice in there too, I think is growing and catching on. Are you feeling good about all of this pushback?
I think it's more than pushback. I think it's an era change. And it's hard to know when human eras begin and end. I mean, they didn't sit in the dark ages and say, hey, the Renaissance starts on Sunday. I've always said that putting kids on the internet unsupervised is like dropping them in downtown Paris at midnight. And now our entire culture is that way. I mean, parents cannot blindly trust their school, their teacher, their librarian, the books they put on the shelves. They can't trust certainly smartphones and social media, TV, movies. And so they have got to be culture cops, parents today. So whoever has access to your kids, and today that's pretty much everyone in the world, to the extent that you can, you got to make sure that they share your values.
Adam, you've written a piece at readlion.com about the vice president attending the National Catholic Prayer Breakfast.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was a great event, and this was another example of a very enjoyable speech. J.D. Vance spoke for, I think it was maybe 20, 25, maximum 30 minutes, but he's quick-paced, he's well-spoken, he's definitely not weird, and which was an accusation falsely leveled against him in the campaign. What really stood out to me is he's actually one of the best defenders of the faith, and maybe particularly the Catholic faith, in our modern day, I believe, or in this modern time. And probably it's because he was a convert to the Catholic faith. And so for him, it's new, it's refreshing. I read his biography years ago where he was saying he was just starting to come back around to consider, matters of faith. I think he grew up more traditional Christian or evangelical. But he's really bought in, he's all in, and he's a great expositor and defender of why he believes what he believes.
Michael, I was just, before the show today, I was reading a story about a measles outbreak, pretty severe in Texas right now. You've written a story about a Kansas student and chickenpox that's pretty interesting. What's going on there?
Yeah, there was a freshman girl at a high school in central Kansas who was basically banned from school and then confined to home because she was exposed to somebody with chickenpox. And, she was confined, not just banned from school, but confined to home, which is basically you're a prisoner. And ultimately, a judge in an appeal ruled that the quarantine that she was under was issued illegally because they didn't give the family written explanation and notice within a week. It was a week after they did all this that they got the explanation on a Sunday morning. And so she was basically treated like a leper, which is interesting. The power of the government to confine people is its greatest power. And especially when you're talking about an innocent person. And this girl was never sick. So this kind of power needs to be watched like a hawk, and it's interesting that the judge overturned that quarantine right away.
Yeah, that's a haunting reminder of the COVID era not too long ago as well, Michael. Panel, thank you. That's just some of the surface we've scratched. Readlion.com for all the headlines where Megyn Kelly and even Elon Musk now are reading, by the way, at readlion.com. When we get back, we'll turn to some of the sound from the week on cable news and across television on Capitol Hill, as the Lion Week in Review rolls on next. Welcome back to the Lion Week in Review. If you missed any of this show you're listening to or watching and you're interested in more great news like you've been hearing today, please regularly check out readlion.com. You don't want to miss any of the stuff these guys write each and every day. Panel, let's turn to the tube. CNN's Jake Tapper has authored a brand new book about the Biden administration. He calls it Original Sin, in which he details the former president's mental decline. Greg Gutfeld, from Fox News, had this reaction.
I'm sorry, but the clip with him and Lara Trump, where he accused her of denigrating Biden's stutter when she was talking about his cognitive difficulties, as though everybody somehow had this information that Joe Biden had a stutter, except, it's like, oh, how dare you? And this all kind of smells, because I don't know how Jake Tapper could have written this book if he didn't believe it. And if he didn't say anything up until this book comes out, if there's still time, maybe Jake should write a mea culpa. Maybe he has inside the book, where he admits that not only did he deny the obvious, which is the biggest story of our political lifetimes, we had a hollow president, but you also denigrated those like Lara Trump who dared to speak out about it.
So, Josh, you've been a journalist a long time, and I just have to ask, when you're a journalist who doesn't acknowledge what a lot of other people see as an obvious truth, then later write a book about that obvious truth, what does that do to you as a journalist and the public perception of you as a journalist?
Yeah, Gutfeld was right. A huge credibility issue here. Now, hopefully, Tapper does say, look, I was hoodwinked, or I wouldn't let myself believe it. I was in denial. Those are all, I think, reasonable ways that he can talk about this. But it sounds like maybe a chance to profit on what is a huge story. Gutfeld's right about that. This is an enormous story. I'm surprised that a publisher thought Tapper was the guy to bring it. I mean, obviously the hypocrisy is just in your face.
Adam, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, definitely it's further proof that these people wanted to believe it because they also wanted the political fruit of what Biden was doing. Nobody cared that he was cognitively not there or out of it or not really in control all or most of the time. They wanted what he was doing, and we had Obama's third term. So a lot of people loved him, and boy, they were happy to have him back.
Michael, can he get, I don't know how the book will sell. I'll be curious to see the numbers on the actual sales, if he sells any. Can you claim for 4 years and even argue with people that the cognitive decline is not there or it's not obvious, only to later write a book about it?
Well, you should have seen the video of him, kind of castigating Laura Trump for questioning Biden's mental cognition. I mean, he was argumentative. He was condescending. If I'd been the publisher, I would have said, hey, Jack, this is a great idea for a book. Let's change the name to Chutzpah, how I covered up Biden's dementia and how I got mad that every other person in the journalism did it as well. It's like the Watergate burglars writing a book about how awful Watergate was.
Democrats, meanwhile, struggling to figure out how to counter the message of the Trump agenda. This has been an ongoing theme. It certainly showed itself on Tuesday night. But this week also, some 23 Senate Democrats released on social media a post that viewers will recognize looks strikingly similar. It sounds strikingly similar, too, but these are all 23 of them mashed up at one time. Check out some of this.
When I win, I will immediately bring prices down starting on day one.
Not true. That's what you
So, Adam, that is a mashup of literally 23 United States senators on the Democrat side, all shooting in the same format, using the same script, using the same visuals in their social media post. The very same talking points. Your reaction?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's obvious they were coached even how to hold the little microphone, and they're kind of hoping that the media doesn't do our job, which is to expose this. They're hoping that kind of what we talked about in the last story, that the media is so in love with what these people are saying, just like they were with what Biden was doing, that they'll just give them a free pass. I'm really glad that alternative media like The Lion and others exist to report on this, because you, the American people, need to know what some of your senators are doing or claiming to do. It's part of a big orchestrated scheme. It's disingenuous.
There was an interesting moment on The View this week. Saying interesting and The View in the same sentence is hard for me often, but Stephen A. Smith, who is not known for his political takes per se, although he's become more political. He's mostly known as a sports guy on ESPN. But he's certainly no conservative, and he paid a visit to the ladies of The View and had an interesting diagnosis of the last election for those on the panel that didn't really seem to want to acknowledge that Trump did have a very commanding win. Listen.
Let me be very clear. I'm no supporter of Trump. I'm a supporter of truth and the facts. And here's the facts. The man won every swing state. He increased in terms of his voter turnout in his favor from the standpoint of blacks, Latinos, and young voters. He increased his numbers in that regard from 2020. 89% of the counties shifted to the right. That's a mandate. We can sit up there and play around all we want to. In 2020, Trump didn't win the popular vote. He didn't win the electoral college vote. A matter of fact, the Republicans hadn't won the popular vote, if I remember correctly, since 2004. But they did this year. So 20 years after they last won the popular vote, they won the popular vote. They won the electoral college vote. The man won every swing state. And on top of it, 89% of the counties shifted against. I don't understand how people can look at that and say, there's no mandate.
Now, Josh, interestingly, this that we just listened to happened prior to Tuesday night's joint address to Congress, and we saw how the Democrats behaved. Stephen A. Smith is one of the rare Democrat voters, non-Trump supporters, that seem to be taking a dose of medicine here.
Yeah, I mean, stats are his business, right? I mean, this is what he does, and he goes back and forth, sports commentary. He argues with guests on First Take on ESPN. I mean, this is his bread and butter, but he knows the stats, and I thought, this was a total posterization. This is a slam dunk. As the kids say, you put your hand on your head, you just got dunked on, and Stephen A. dunked all over her.
Adam, how about you? Your reaction to that? That's one of the rare Democrats admitting what many of them don't seem to want to acknowledge.
Yeah, that's exactly my point, Chris, is that why can't these people just admit they lost? And I think if they admit that, then they would have to admit Trump's right and that the American people actually want his agenda.
Is it possible that I saw, he doesn't vote this way necessarily, Michael, but even John Fetterman said that Democrats really made fools of themselves this week during the joint address. Now, again, how he votes is a little different than what he says on social media, but could that be a winning formula for Democrats to acknowledge how they've stumbled?
It could be a start to rehab, really. Stephen A. Smith showed the problem with the left, and that is they operate on emotion rather than intellect. Now, I agree with Josh that Stephen A. Smith has made a living with stats and so forth, but he's also made a cottage industry of emotional rants. He went on The View and gave an intellectual rant, basically, showing them the truth of the matter. And again, the people on the left are still operating on emotion rather than intellect.
Maybe some of you remember the children's television show Bill Nye the Science Guy. Well, over the years, he's become increasingly more vocal politically, especially when it comes to climate issues. This week, a number of NOAA, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration employees were cut loose as part of the federal workforce layoffs during the DOGE cuts. And Bill Nye has a theory on this. Listen.
Mr. Musk has this company Starlink, and he's proposing that NOAA be supplanted by a private company. And just to the young guys that have gone to work on this, that have gone into the Digital Services Office to destroy or mess up our electronic systems, keep in mind that this is fundamental corruption. It's just corruption when you're trying to monopolize a government service.
Michael, is Musk this shadowy figure trying to corrupt the government for his own benefit?
I didn't know it was Bill Nye, the politics guy. I need to change my paradigm there. Look, the notion that Elon Musk is in this to make money is just absolutely insane. The man has all the money on earth. He doesn't need any more money. The fact of the matter is, he's been donating Starlink services to people in other countries to promote free speech when X and other social media apparatus were taken away from the people. And he made it available to the people of North Carolina after Helene when FEMA wasn't anywhere in the neighborhood.
Let me give you quickly before we go to break. Donald Trump with a classic moment. Love to get your reaction, all three of you, as members of the media yourselves. Here's Donald Trump being Trump with a member of the media. Take a listen to some of this.
What are you saying?
She's asking, what if Russia breaks the ceasefire?
What if anything? What if a bomb drops on your head right now? Okay? What if they broke it?
Adam?
Well, Trump's older, wiser, and he's just not going to put up with this stuff, and it's so refreshing to see.
Yeah, what ifs, Josh? What if, Josh? He's not having any time for the
he
what
doesn't
ifs.
have time for the hypotheticals. Yeah. These are huge issues.
Michael?
Well, here's another guy that doesn't need the money. He doesn't need re-election. He just doesn't care. The Kansas City Chiefs had a player a few years ago that they called the Honey Badger because the Honey Badger just doesn't care.
Thank you,
That's
panel.
Trump.
That's fantastic. I appreciate it. Panel coming up next to the Lion Week in Review, our favorite part of the week. We get to pick our favorites, stories we think you shouldn't miss. Stay tuned. That's next on the Lion Week in Review. Welcome back to the Lion Week in Review. Our panel, Michael, Josh, and Adam, are back to tell us their favorite stories of the week. Adam, we start with you.
Yeah, we had a story about Zelensky of Ukraine suddenly changing his tune, and it happened right after Trump pulled all the funding and also kind of said no and you're being ungrateful in the Oval Office.
Isn't that interesting? And it happened pretty quickly. Michael, your favorite this week?
I think it was Adam's story about Vance defending Trump at the National Catholic Prayer Breakfast. We need to remember that persecution does happen in America. It doesn't feel like it, but it happens. We're talking about arrests of pro-lifers. We're talking about draconian sentences for people outside of abortion clinics. We're talking about a guy losing his job for silently praying in his head. We're talking about spying on Catholics. We're talking about attacks on churches and pro-life pregnancy centers. Yes, persecution happens in America. It needs to stop, and it seems like it is.
And isn't it strange, Michael, to that point? Vance gave a speech in Munich a couple of weeks ago on that very theme to global leaders, and it was kind of amazing the number of people that said they felt like they had to apologize to world leaders for Vance somehow offending them.
It's amazing. I mean, Vance's speech at the Munich conference will go down as an Iron Curtain quality speech. It was about the digital curtain that's coming down over across Europe when it comes to free speech.
Josh, your favorite story of the week?
Well, this one's a little different. We covered a nonprofit in the UK that is putting together stop-motion, Lego-based videos to try to tell biblical stories. And so, we see these kinds of creative endeavors all the time from Christians who are simply trying to share the good news of the Christian faith in unique ways. And so, for something a little different, I would encourage our audience, go check it out at readline.com.
I'm going to throw an opinion question your way to wrap up the show today, and that is, we heard God invoked twice in the president's speech this week, which I really appreciated. We've talked about what he said to kids and how they're all perfect in God's image. He also said that he believed his life was spared in Butler so that he could make the country great again. He said God spared his life. He truly believed that. Michael, is this a different Trump?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's the same honey badger, but with religion. You can't go through that kind of experience with a bullet just inches from killing you and not be changed. And he is definitely different. And, the media and the left have not caught up to the fact that he is a different person, but a lot of people can see it.
Adam?
Yeah, he's different, but he's also the same. He's still bold, he's still brash, he's still unpolished in a lot of ways. So if you want to hold him to some impossible, evangelical Christian standard, you will be disappointed. But I do believe his faith is genuine at whatever level it is. I do believe he's acting, in his best of faith to do what he really believes.
Great stuff. Panel, thank you. That's going to do it for us this week. I hope you'll keep up to date on all the latest news every day. Even Megyn Kelly and Elon Musk are doing it now at readlion.com. And again, if you missed any of today's show, be sure to check it out on YouTube. For all of us here at The Lion, thanks for downloading the show and for listening, and we'll see you next time.